Welcome to the deep dive. It is Monday, March 31st. My name is Alex Rousey. I'm a member of the research team here at Keeping Current Matters. We are so glad to have you here to start your week off with us. We do this every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern, and we focus on one of the most important topics in real estate each week so that you have the full context of what's going on out there and you're able to share that information with your clients and anyone that you know, so that you can hopefully have more conversations that eventually lead to more deals for you. I want to go ahead and get started by sharing my screen and getting into our topic for today. As I do every time, I like to remind all of our KCM members that you have complete access to these slides in your member area. You can print them, download them on your phone, use them when you're talking to people in your community. And if you're not a KCM member, thank you for being here today. TryKCM.com is where you're going to want to go to get a 14-day free trial. You'll be able to access these slides and much more. Great membership that can help you really get out there and be the knowledge broker in your community. So what we're going to talk about today is the news makes it sound worse than it is. This is something a lot of us already know and have heard many times before. There has been a lot of talk lately about the state of the economy, the possibility of a recession at some point in the future. And we want to provide you with the context to understand exactly what's going on as it relates to the housing market, and then be able to share that context with all the buyers and sellers that you work with that are seeing a lot of these news headlines about what's going on in the economy and how it might impact their plans to buy or sell a home. Hopefully you can set the record straight for them so that they can make a confident, informed decision whenever they're going to buy or sell a home this year. So we're just going to get right into it here and start off with this quote from Alex over at Groundwork Collective. Kind of sets the scene for what we're going to talk about today with regards to the economy and a potential recession and what it means for the housing market. He says, what you need to keep an economy chugging is businesses investing, businesses hiring, and people spending money. If people are apprehensive about whether their jobs are going to go away or whether there are going to be more layoffs in the future, you're going to start to see a pullback on spending. So we're always looking out for potential recession indicators or things that might lead to an increased possibility of a recession. And people pulling back on spending money is one of those indicators. And it's something that we saw in January. So what you're looking at here is the personal consumption expenditures, PCE, which is a measurement of just basically all the money that all Americans spend on a monthly basis. And basically that typically goes up every single month. But what we saw in January was a tick down in personal consumption expenditures. And it was the first time that that's happened in 2 years. You can see here, we just got the February data on Friday, and personal consumption expenditures did go back up and have kind of reached a little bit above where they were in December. But that drop off in January is very uncharacteristic and is one indicator that there's a little bit of apprehension, a little bit of anxiety in the economy right now about people kind of pulling back on spending just a little bit. Maybe it's because they're worried about a recession, potentially worried about layoffs or losing their job. And for whatever reason, seeing something like that as one indicator that a recession could be more likely than typical in the coming months and years. To add to that, we also just follow a lot of economists that study this stuff on a daily basis, and they are talking about increased odds of a recession too. Here's one from Mark Zandi. This is one of the most trusted names in the housing market, the chief economist over at Moody's Analytics. He said, the risks of a U.S. recession starting in the coming year are uncomfortably high and rising. I would put them at 35%, up from 15% at the start of the year. So there's a couple things that you should get from this. First off, 15% is the baseline expectation for a recession in any year. And that's because a recession typically occurs in the U.S. economy every 6 or 7 years. So basically there's a 15% chance of a recession any year, every year. And Mark Zandi's saying he'd put that up at 35%. That's noteworthy because that's considerably higher than normal. But it's also noteworthy because he's not saying the recession is likely or that he would expect one to happen this year, just that it is more likely than normal. 35% is still well below 50%, and very few people are saying we should definitely expect a recession this year. But it's definitely more likely than it has been recently. So that's kind of the facts on where things are and how people are feeling about the economy. And naturally, the news and headlines will run with that. And that's what leads to headlines do more to terrify than they do to clarify. The news has to get clicks, and they often will share information in the headlines that is factually accurate, but could be misleading without the full context. And that's what we worry that maybe your buyers and sellers will see, and it could cause them to worry and potentially pause their moving plans when they're not actually having the full context of what's really going on and being able to make an informed decision. So what we want to do is be able to provide you with the information to give the full context on what's going on with the economy and the housing market, and then be able to share that so that your buyers and sellers can make informed decisions. I'm going to share just a few of the headlines that we've seen just over the past couple of weeks. You can see a number of them talk about a recession being likely. Builders are overbuilding. The housing market looks a lot like 2008. Another Great Depression could hit the U.S. and the housing market would collapse. So when things happen like personal consumption expenditures dip for a month, or economists talk about the fact that a recession could be a little bit more likely than normal, uncomfortably so, but still below 50%, this sort of stuff starts running rampant out there in the news. And there's another one that we just saw the other day. This is from Patrick Bet David. 6.1 million Americans are behind on their mortgage, the highest in 20 plus years. Brace for impact. What he's saying there is not completely inaccurate. It's actually factually true. Just looking at the graph there, this is Freddie Mac's serious delinquency rates. But what you might miss if you're not looking very closely is that this is talking about multifamily delinquency rates. This leaves out all the single family homes in the market, and single family delinquency rates are actually about where they were last month, about where they were last year, and very close to pre-pandemic norms. So single family delinquency rates aren't really a cause for concern. But if you see this without looking closely and seeing that we're talking about multifamily delinquency rates here, could be cause for alarm. Again, just another example of something that's factually accurate, but needs the full context before you actually rush to judgment. So we want to start with one of the first headlines that we've been seeing the most, talking about how a recession would have a negative impact on the housing market. A lot of people think the recession would cause housing prices to crash, and that's because that's what we saw in 2008. But to set the record straight, we have taken a look at what happens to housing prices typically in a normal recession. This graph shows the change in housing prices over the last 6 recessions: 1980, 81, 91, 2001, 2008, of course, and then 2020 during the pandemic. And what you can see is that, generally speaking, when we have a recession, that does not mean that housing prices will crash. Obviously, 2008 is the exception there. And that recession was a little bit different than normal because we all know that the 2008, the great financial crisis of 2008, was kind of the catalyst for that was the housing market. So that one aside, you can see that in 4 of the 6 home prices actually went up during recessions. And on average, when you combine all those, it's an average of about 4% price increase, which is very normal. So we found a quote here that just summarizes this perfectly from Lori Goodman at the Urban Institute. A lot of people have this idea that home prices will fall during recessionary periods. They might have that idea because of some of the headlines we just took a look at. there's really not much of a connection between home prices and recessionary periods, other than, of course, the great financial crisis. So when you see headlines, or the people that you're talking to see headlines talking about a recession could be coming this year and it will have a detrimental impact on the housing market, set the record straight and let them know that, sure, a recession wouldn't be a great thing, but it does not mean that home prices will crash, because in the last 6 recessions, home prices typically actually rose a little bit during recessions. What we can say does happen during recessions, typically speaking, is that mortgage rates generally fall. So again, this is information from the same last 6 recessions, and we can see that in each one of them, mortgage rates actually declined. So you don't want to necessarily say that a recession has any good news, or we're just trying to find the silver lining and look factually at what happens during a recession. Housing prices do not crash, generally speaking, but mortgage rates do come down. So for anybody who's financially stable or in a strong financial position, this could be a good sign for them. But it's important to just have the full context of when a recession comes, generally speaking, for the housing market, home prices aren't typically affected much, and mortgage rates tend to come down. The other big headline that we've seen a lot lately is talking about how new construction inventory has reached 2008, 2009 levels. And anytime you talk about the housing market and you put 2008 or 2009 into a headline, that is naturally going to cause a little bit of fear. But it is technically accurate. So here we can see the number of new homes completed on the market. This is the seasonally adjusted rate, is at 119,000 for February. That does equal where we were in the summer of 2009. And going back further, you can see there at about the beginning of 2006 on this graph. So it is true, the number of newly built homes that have been completed in February of 2025 does equal the amount that we saw in 2009. But take a look at the graph. The number of new homes completed during the great financial crisis of 2008 was significantly higher than we are right now. And the housing market and the economy is in a very different state. Builders have the experience of having gone through 2008, and they're not going to let new home inventory reach those levels again. That's why we've talked about it in recent weeks, that builders are cutting prices in many areas, offering plenty of incentives on new homes. And really what they're not doing, they're not overbuilding, they're just trying to catch up. This graph shows that single-family housing units completed each year going back to 1970. And what you can see is we're coming off a period where we've had 15 plus years of underbuilding. The market has been starved for inventory. I don't have to tell you that. I'm sure you know. 2024, 2.2% increase in the number of single-family housing units completed from the year prior. But look how far that is below those 4 red bars where there actually was overbuilding happening leading into the 2008 great financial crisis. We're far below that right now. And we're coming off of a period where we were underbuilt. So when we see that new home inventory is at 2009 levels, that sounds like a bad thing. But in actuality, that is just a good thing for the market that has been starved for inventory. And builders are not even coming close to approaching the levels of completions that they had just prior to that 2008 crash. Odetta Cushy summarized it very well. She said, "This means more homes on the market and more options for home buyers, which is good news for a housing market that has been underbuilt for over a decade." This is a good thing. We need more new construction. And the fact that we're at the levels where we were in 2009, it's a totally different situation than it was then. It does not mean that we are leading or heading up to another great crash thanks to overbuilding. We're just catching up after being underbuilt for so many years. So hopefully what we've done here is given a little bit of context on what actually happens to the housing market during a recession, and that when you see headlines about new construction being at 2008, 2009 levels, that should not be an alarming thing. that is a good thing. That is information that you want to share with your buyers to let them know that builders are catching up after being underbuilt for many years. And this high level of inventory that they have right now is leading to incentives from builders, price cuts in many situations, and just opportunities for them. So it's really a message to get out there that, sure, a recession may be more likely this year than it has been in recent years. That does not mean the housing market's going to crash, and there are opportunities in new construction for them. Before we wrap up, I do want to share this with you all. You've probably seen this before. We partner with John Burns Research and Consulting to put together a monthly survey of real estate agents asking what's going on in your housing market. We have a few pointed questions for you. We'd like for you to scan the QR code here. This survey will open up tomorrow, and it's an opportunity for you to share your perspective on the housing market and ultimately influence our research and our content. So what we're able to provide for you is made better the more voices and the more local perspectives we have on what's going on in the housing market. This is your opportunity to share that with us. So if you haven't already, please do scan this QR code, take the survey. It takes 3 minutes tops, and just let us know what you're seeing and what's going on in your market so that we can do better research here and put out content that better helps you and ultimately leads to more conversations and more deals for you. Because that's our objective. That's what we're here to do. We're here to help you, and I'll end it as we always do. We're here to help you be one of the great agents that can explain what's happening. Most agents know what's happening. Good agents understand what's happening, but only the great ones can explain what's happening. So when you have people in your sphere asking you about the headlines, you can explain what's really happening in the housing market, what's really happening in the economy, and how it's going to impact them so they can make a move that's best for them. That's all that we have for today. I really, really appreciate you being here with us. We'll be back next Monday, April 7th. Can't believe it's already going to be April, 11 a.m. Eastern, with another great topic in the housing market. Thanks for being with us, and we hope you have a great week.